Yes, hello, folks. Welcome to the weekly Manchester United podcast. I am your host, as always, Phil Brand, joined with my regular co-host, the excellent James Rhodes. It's been 2 weeks since we recorded. We were going to record last week, but United's game fell later in the week. It was already Wednesday. We decided not to do it, or I did anyway. Sorry, my apologies. Never
All good.
you. I did make sure I made a note just from one of your tweets yesterday to have a little chat with you about. I enjoyed that. Was that
hmm
what I said? Enjoyed that. And obviously, we'll talk about the derby yesterday. Lots of stuff making the news with United. We'll talk about the sit-in protest, which, of course, United fans organised after the game. We'll talk about Lyon coming up this week. Some other talking points. Will Liam Delap be a Manchester United player? We'll see.
Mm.
First of all, mate, how you doing?
Yeah, doing pretty well. Doing pretty well right now. Was warming up. Sun's coming out. I'm excited to get back outside and have an actual spring and summer coming.
Good luck with that. I was at the beach, Newport Beach yesterday.
Yeah, we had
It
snow
was,
Friday, so it is good luck here for me to have
yeah,
any good times outside. But
we were down in Newport Beach, and you can be anywhere in the world and think you're a 7, 8, 9, or a 10, and go to Newport Beach, and it will destroy your confidence. Everyone looks amazing, But had a great day with the kids, and had relatively nice weekend. So
Yep.
you also get seasons out there, which we don't, unfortunately. So
Yeah, yeah.
beautiful part of the world, Colorado. Mate, lots to talk about, of course, with the derby yesterday. Many different commentaries, depends on your perspective on what you see. I know you had put something out that said you enjoyed it. Personally, I didn't enjoy it. I thought it was a game that looked like one of those World Cup games that were, both teams knew they were through. It was a dead rubber at the end of a group, and nobody really wanted to win the game or shoot or score or take risks or impose themselves. It looked like both of those teams were happy with the stalemate before they left the tunnel. That is probably the poorest City team I've seen since the whole Abu Dhabi takeover, I would say. I mean, if you look at when Abu Dhabi took over with Mark Hughes, all that, they were always competitive. In fact, many times they would bat the United, but this City team was not impressed. And I think the game was there for the taking, but United lacked the quality in the final third. What was your take on the game?
Yeah, I enjoyed it actually quite a bit, and I did kind of like I rewatched a bunch of replays this morning, and what was really interesting to me is I would agree with City, but I would give United maybe a little bit more credit,
Mm,
for what they did to create that circumstance. Obviously, Erling Haaland is injured. That's an issue for them. Then again, the last game United played at the Etihad against them, Erling Haaland was completely locked up by Harry Maguire as well. Didn't do anything, and United ended up winning that game late on. Also, I look at it and I think 4 points in 2 games against cities, something you take at the start of a year. That not many teams get those kind of results against City, even at their lowest. They've come off a win against Bournemouth, a win against Leicester, draw against Brighton, a win against Tottenham. Even the Madrid Champions League tie was pretty competitive in the first leg, especially. The second leg was a bit more. They're not amazing, but I look at United and think, start of the season, Liverpool came into Old Trafford, destroyed us. An embarrassing game to watch.
mhm,
Tottenham came into Old Trafford, destroyed us. An embarrassing game to watch for
mhm,
United. I'm satisfied that those days are over. I don't walk into games and think we're going to get
mhm,
embarrassed. We're going to be destroyed. We're going to look and say, you know what? We are the worst team. In fact, if you look at it in a little bit of a balanced take since the last time we've done this, we've played the team in third and the team in fifth in the Premier League. And I think we probably should have won both games on balance of chances, on balance of creation, on balance of what we've done. I think in both games we were much the better team and performing pretty well on the whole. Against City, I think we could have scored in the first minute of the game. We could have scored 2 or 3 more times in the first 15 minutes, and it would have looked a lot different. I don't think United have the quality to sustain and really get into it overall, to win games. It ironically, I watched Amorim's team at Sporting beat City in the Champions League in the not the group stages, but that early round now, whatever
Mm.
you call it, right? I watched them beat them pretty drastically, and it was really similar to that game that we just watched. They were fine with ceding a lot of territory, letting City have a bit of the ball. They scored their chances. They took them every single time. They scored their chances. United don't. And I think in a lot of ways, that's the difference. That was the difference against Forest. Didn't score any of our chances. And to be clear, I think that's kind of the story of the season for me is the improvements that we are seeing in recent times are somewhat dulled by the fact, nothing we can do about it now, that quite honestly, the two best scorers in the front line that United had to start the season are not available in Ahmad and Marcus Rashford. Neither of them are here for different reasons, injured and otherwise. We don't have goal scoring. We don't have anybody who's really finishing these chances across the team, and it is a team issue. We just don't have them. It's not enough, but there was probably 5 clear-cut situations where you'd say United should have scored a couple when I went through the replays and watched again. And for City, it was 0. And I have to say that's pretty good. I mean, City have not,
I think it was 0. I think Phil Foden should have scored. His
yeah,
first
there
touch
was that one
there.
chance that he had. I think it was that you're right about that. I forgot there was the one where it's like a tackle that bounced through to him, right?
His first
And
touch
then
was poor, and just
yeah,
slightly got ahead of him. But although it was a brilliant tackle from Mazraoui, to be
yeah,
fair, but this was my
that was
point,
it.
James. This is my point. Is like you talk about we've played third and fifth, but we haven't scored a goal against either of
I know.
them, right? And that to me is a very small consolation that we've just lost one of them by a goal because I mean I saw Forest at the weekend. Forest lost at the weekend. They're to me a good team. Okay, I understand United were away, but when I'm looking at United teams, the front line is a major concern. And when we're saying Ahmad's not available, Ahmad was unlucky with injury, but everything else was a choice.
Yep.
They chose to get rid of these players. These were financial decisions, not football decisions. There's no doubt about that. Now, I'm not saying that Anthony and Marcus Rashford didn't need to leave. They clearly did, and they're clearly better for that choice. They're enjoying, a level of football and a certain prosperity that they weren't getting at United. I mean, Anthony looks like a completely different footballer in the Liga. There's confidence. He's running at players. He looks dangerous. If you were scouting Anthony at Real Betis and saying that guy's coming to United, you'd be really excited. To me, this is a reflection of how bad things are inside the football club, where it's really, really difficult to get players to perform to their peak consistently because there's clearly an environmental issue at the football club that prohibits that. You've got young Garnacho, who clearly wanted to leave in January, who has looked a shadow of the player he was since Amorim has come in. I mean, all his best form was under Ten Hag. You've got Rasmus Højlund, who a few weeks ago, my concern was United just don't create chances for him. But now I'm looking at things. One of the things that really stood out to me yesterday, when Bruno Fernandes checked him on it, was when that ball was played to Dorgu. Dorgu ended up shooting. His position was just
Terrible.
atrocious.
Yeah, it was
Where you
really
would want your
bad.
defender to be,
Yeah,
right?
he was
And I'm
practically in
like,
front of him. Yeah,
well,
yeah.
because Dorgu has no option. Like, what do you want him to do? Even if you get the ball there,
Yep.
what do you as a forward? The thing about what concerns me about that, James, is this is instinctive, right?
Yes.
This is everything else that you do in a football pitch. Confidence affects thought. It affects deliberation, right? Nothing that happens instinctively, confidence doesn't really affect it, right? Because you don't have time to think about it. So the runs that a striker takes and makes in the box are instinctive.
Yep.
And he's occupying, this is not the first time I've been concerned about this. He's occupying positions that I'm baffled at. There's
Mm-hmm.
so many times where I'll see United out wide, and Rasmus Højlund is, in a terrible position behind the defender, and I'm like,
Always between
what,
two,
yeah,
never
what
front,
do you want
never
to do
behind.
here?
Yeah,
Yeah, and
yeah,
I'm like, this is a big concern
yeah.
because even one of the reasons why United aren't creating chances is because of the positioning just
Correct.
Rasmus Højlund is taking up.
Totally agree.
Xerxes comes on yesterday and immediately looks,
Yep.
And Xerxes to me is also the guy that doesn't have the instinct of a striker
Yep.
and almost scores. I really want Højlund to work out. I think the kid has talent, but when I was watching Fulham Liverpool, Moniz, I think I was his 11th goal of the season. I'm like, why is it that players that are signed for a fraction of what Højlund is signed for in worse teams are hitting double figures? And Rasmus Højlund,
Yep.
I think Marcus Rashford has more goals and assists since he's gone to Villa than, with the exception of Imaginate's front line put together. Like, this is unacceptable.
Well, Maguire, there was the stat that Maguire when he came on as a sub up front against Forest, accumulated more expected goals than Rasmus has it combined in like 10 games.
He had
In
2
10 minutes.
touches. I saw a stat on Sky. He had 2 touches in City's half.
Yep.
Right? The first half. Just in their half. Never mind their box. Their half.
Yeah. Well, we
This
saw
is
this in that.
Every time they go forward, the attack collapses.
Yep.
Every single it's either a poor ball, they overplay it, or Garnacho cuts inside and shoots and it doesn't. There's no threat. And even when they don't have numbers in the box, and it's that, just to extrapolate this point a little further, where I will defend Amorim on. You have to build from the back. The only way to improve morale in a football club is to win football games.
Yes.
And if you can't win them, the first thing you have to do is make sure you don't lose them.
Correct.
So Ruben Amorim came into United in November. By January he was there 6-7 weeks. He had to get rid of his forward line. And the only players he was allowed to sign in January was a young left back and a young centre back, who I think had only had one substitute appearance in the whole of the Premier League in his life.
And then got injured in one game.
Yeah, and even he gets injured, right?
Yeah.
And then he's playing against Guardiola, who's been there for years, allegedly the best manager that's ever breathed. Spent 180 million in January, and Amorim has taken 4 points off him since then. So I'm disappointed with the performance, but overall we can't be too disappointed with the outcome.
Well, I agree, and that was kind of my point. City have scored 50 goals since January 1st in 20 games. That's 2.5 goals a game, and they barely got a chance against United. I thought that aspect, I think, is a positive. It's a big improvement on what we've seen. It's a big improvement on, getting battered every single game. It's what we can do. I think the defense has really, really shored up. I think we've been able to settle the game down, you know what I mean? Where we're not looking scared every second of the game. Every second something's going to go wrong. Every second we're going to implode, you know what I mean? I think that is progress in that respect. But you can't do anything about this goal scoring problem. And I kind of agree. Not kind of, I actually completely agree. And I think we saw a real warning sign. That game where it really started to stick out was that game in the Cup Fulham when Cheeto Obi came on for 10 minutes and made 3 chances. Just out of nothing. He just makes them. And it's an instinct. And it's kind of a big debate because we'll talk about Liam Delap, obviously, in this thing too, big talk at striker and all of that. Because I look at it and I go, one of my biggest concerns with the service argument, not to say service isn't the factor, not to say all of that, but here's what is weird to me, right? We have in Bruno Fernandes probably the best chance creator of the last 5 years in the Premier League. And I look at all the strikers United have had in the last 10 years, right? Over the bad period, right? Zlatan comes in, scores a bunch of goals. No service problem. He scores a bunch of goals. Lukaku follows him up, scores a bunch of goals. No service problem. When Lukaku leaves, we stop scoring for a while. We have a service problem. Cavani joins, and when he was playing, no problem. He was finding the net. But these are really good strikers, right? When you talk about Zlatan, Lukaku at that point in time in his career, Cavani, these are really good strikers. Even Ronaldo comes back. in the season Solskjaer gets sacked, scores 18 Premier League goals, and he could barely run. And so
Marcus
many of
Rashford,
them,
what, he hit 30 something? Wasn't
yes,
a service problem?
yes, no service problem. And I think that the problem we have here is that when a striker is poor in their instincts and their movement, you can't create for them. You can't, like you're saying, you can't, like that instance with Dorgo. I watched that exact replay not an hour ago, and I watched it like 10 times over. The ball goes out to Dorgu, and Hoyland just keeps running towards him. The back post, there's 15 yards
But
of
it's a
empty
Danish
space at the
teammate,
back
Jim. He
post.
knows it's his Danish teammate. He knows him inside out.
Yeah, he can't. But what's Dorgu going to do then? He can't cross it because nobody's
Yeah, he
there.
leaves him
He
with no
could have
choice
gone
but to
back post
shoot.
and been wide open. So what else can he do? And it's like you can't create chances when that happens. There's one Casemiro goes down the right, crosses it in, and the perfect run is there for Hoyland to go in front of Guardiola to get towards it, but he waits till the cross comes in. And that's reactive, not instinctive. And that's what you're talking about. Those striker instincts. I feel like you either have it or you don't. And my concern is if you don't, and obviously United are in the market for a striker for a good reason.
The part that's hard for me to grasp with that, James, is this is something you learn as a young kid. Like, you don't get to this level unless you understand how to create space for yourself. Like, to me, I'm looking at a Hoyland and going, he's a Danish international, scored decent amount of goals in Denmark. He scored a decent amount of goals for Atalanta. Now, the Italian league is not an easy league to hit, big numbers in, because they're Catenaccio. They're very, very good at defending, and they're very, very good at closing down space. The best strikers make space out of nowhere. Right, they are able to find pockets of space. That they're able to look like they switch off in a game, and then boom, attack a space, and they kill you. I'm looking at young Hoyland and going, is it he doesn't want the ball because his confidence is on the floor? I don't think it's that. But I'm looking at it and going, I don't understand how, as a striker, when that ball goes wide to Dorgu, and you're aware of your surroundings, why you attack that space, because you have I understand going front post and getting in front of the defender, but I'm looking at that and I'm going, okay, even if somehow Dorgu finds you, you still have to control the ball, turn a defender,
and now
get,
he's
or
back.
if you somehow get a left foot shot on goal from that angle, you need a miracle to score. I'm like, this, and then you give Dorgu no chance. Anyway, I don't want to beat this to death, but that is a big concern.
I'm with you. I agree with you.
And he has to start scoring now, James, or United, will have to move on, because you cannot go into a third season with this young lad not scoring goals and still relying on him and going, well, we thought, I do genuinely feel if he was playing for another team, maybe a Brighton or something, he would be doing a lot better. But it's just, I don't know. It just, at United, it's difficult, because I'm watching United every single week for the most part, and they're so one-dimensional on how they attack. I mean, it's basically you have to make a major mistake or it's going to require a piece of magic from Bruno Fernandes, just like it did with Ahmad, or set piece. But very rarely are United cutting you open. And, Rasmus Højlund's finishing a chance as a result of build-up play or one of the forwards. It just isn't. I mean, you're starting to see some improvements there on that. United had a decent amount of chances they created against Forest. The Xerxes one was as a result of build-up play, but it's just rare. And I don't know that this football team, they just don't look like they have a serious threat. And the goal return has just been nowhere near good enough. This is a big, big problem. And, I'm looking at other players like Marmoush, everything. Players that have come in January already ahead of Højlund on league goals this season. Asensio already, like, this is...
And a lot of relegated teams with strikers that are doing a lot more with less.
Delap, just average Premier League strikers that are miles ahead in goals in worse teams. I'm like, this is a big concern. Other things I want to talk about, Casemiro yesterday, fantastic.
Yeah.
Now, I want to say something, James, and do something that I never do, honestly never, and that's pat myself in the back. No. I remember saying a while ago on the show I don't believe that Casemiro's legs are gone, because legs don't go like that. They don't all of a sudden you're playing at the very highest level, then you can't move. I never believed that to be the case. To me, his decline was a bit perplexing, because footballers just don't, they gradually slip, right?
Mhm.
And then eventually it becomes obvious. Or this is a guy that had an exceptional first season. Last season was a total calamity for pretty much everyone. This season, he was left out by Amarin. He's had the football club attack him over the structure of his deal and constantly use his deal as an example of bad business. He never complained. He was left out of the cup final. Yet he's come back into the team and been magnificent. Really, really, he's been a breath of fresh air in a lot of ways, in a midfield that's badly needed him, with obviously Kobe Mainu being out.
Mhm.
And you know, to me, I thought he was exceptional yesterday.
Yeah, I thought he did really well. I was actually really happy with the midfield setup against both Forest and City, and I think Casemiro was really good in both.
Mhm.
I think it definitely suits him having another hardworking, hard-running midfielder next to him, rather than being alone, to cover massive amounts of space and things like that. Because that's a lot of what happened last year, right? When he was playing with Christian Eriksen. Now, Christian Eriksen is one I think we could all agree his legs have gone. He's not
Mhm.
a player who has the legs anymore. And for most of the season, Casemiro was chasing his shadow, chasing the players getting by in that midfield by himself last year. And that definitely affected the performances in these games. Um, in Europe where it's a slower pace as well, it helps. But I've really liked it the last couple games. Actually, that's why I say I give a little bit of credit, for the performance for limiting City, because I thought the setup in there um, worked quite well to completely nullify really anything City were trying to do in the middle throughout the whole game, and Casemiro did a very good job with that as well. And I think that there's a way forward here. And the other factor in this is it does get Bruno forward. And I know we haven't scored goals in the last couple of games, but it's not like Bruno hasn't been influential. He's probably had some of his best games still. Getting to be back up in the forward line, and hopefully, and I feel part of it is the fact that the other players aren't scoring is a big part of wanting to get Bruno back up in there, and get him forward too. But yeah, I think Casemiro's done well, and Emram said, um, gave him a lot of credit for that and the post thingy, because he was asked about Casemiro obviously for not playing him before, and he said, "Yeah, I left him out because I didn't think he fit what I wanted from a midfielder, but he's doing it, and he's come a long way, and he's worked out a way to play for us and all of that, and that's a big credit to Casemiro because he's a very intelligent player, as well. So I think that's really good to see. I think that's a definite positive too. That he deserves a lot of credit for contributing. At this point in time, what he's contributing, and I think if we go on to win the Europa League, which I do think United have a decent chance at, being very good defensively is good for cup games. I think it gives us a little bit of a better chance, and we're getting better in that respect. Um, I think Casemiro will be a big part of that for sure. It's a competition that I think he thrives even more in, at this stage, and can be super key to. So I think that's important, and I always want to see a player succeed. Obviously, Casemiro's had quite a career, so he knows what it takes.
Another positive yesterday, of course, was Mason Mount playing. Mason Mount
Yeah.
won. Thought he'd done quite well for a lad that hasn't played in quite a while. Um, I do feel for him. I know, like I was listening to an old interview with Phil Jones
Mm,
about just how truly devastating repetitive injuries are on your psychology, and of course, you're embarrassed, and
mm,
and of course, I was listening to him talk about his last game and how he knew that his knee had already gone by the time he had played, and he was embarrassed about it. It's going to be the same for Mason Mount, Luke Shaw. These injuries are not their fault.
yeah.
And the human body is no two human bodies respond the same way to exactly the same rehabilitative treatment and trigger points, and where there's stress on the body and how it responds and feels, and none of us are in charge, or none of us get to pick our biology. We're just,
Mm,
we are the way we are. I thought he played well, like I said, encouraging. If United can keep him fit between now and the end of the season, where you can get more minutes, you can manage his load properly, he will be a vital part of the last leg of this season. Of course, United have this huge game coming up against Lyon. And I think also for his career at United, this is very important that he
yes.
remains fit and available between now and the end of the season. What also, of course, Luke Shaw on the bench yesterday. Those are two big positives for United. The bench yesterday looked much more like a Manchester United bench.
Yeah. It did, and it's funny how that happens with injuries, like I said. That's the other factor in all of this with the with the talk and everything, is it does always go under the radar just how much United have suffered compared to other teams from in terms of players. I mean, in Mason Mount and Luke Shaw, you're talking about two of their highest paid players that have not been available for ages. And and not having them, but then even then, Delict has a small injury that'll probably have him miss Lyon as well. So, Maguire has to come off for Lindelof at 70
Mhm.
minutes. You know what I mean? Because his minutes are being managed. And like these are the things that United have to deal with that kind of go, unacknowledged sometimes in the contributions. But it was really good to see that from Mason Mount. I think he and Xerxes together when they came on pressed the hell out of City and gave United probably their best sustained pressure of the game the last 15, 20 minutes. I mean, if anyone was going to win in the last 15 minutes, it was United for sure. Once Mount and Xerxes came on, they looked the more likely. I liked that. It was good, and hopefully he can stay fit, even if it's as an impact substitute to come on, try to make something happen in the last 20, 30 minutes of the game, and he stays like that for a bit. It obviously gives us something more off the bench that we haven't had, and that's good to see. Luke Shaw as well, probably will come on, will probably be long term now a left center back. I can't see him ever playing again at wing back because it's just the risk on his body getting up and down the pitch with the injuries he's had just seems unlikely. At left center back, a bit less running, a bit less to do. Fits it really well also. He's so good on the ball. I think he'd be a big asset to United if he can get in the team. Um, and again, the type of thing where if you want to be able to take Lenny Oro off and not have him play 90 minutes every week, then 20, 30 minutes for Shaw would be very helpful there. By the way, that on Lenny Oro,
I
I
was
thought
going to mention him next.
incredible. He was really, really good yesterday. Like absolutely fantastic.
One of the things that I like about Euro, his building is obvious, right?
Yeah.
Uh, Anytime there's a wee Danny Brook, a bit of a scuffle, he's always one of the first ones over,
Mhm.
separating people. I'm like, I'll tell you
Yeah.
what, I'd watch my mouth for that lad. Big 6 feet, 3, 4
Yeah.
lad coming over. That lad, he has this docile, placid look about him where he feels like a big cuddly kid. But then there's the other side of
Oh,
that
yeah.
where, you underestimate him at your peril. Like, I
Mhm.
like that he has a little bit of that tenacity about him, a little
Edge,
bit of
yeah.
bite about him.
Yeah.
He's so elegant on the ball. I remember the Southampton game we had people question, that's the type of performance sometimes you ruin a player and they never recover. I mean, the kid brushed it off. And to play in that United team is not easy.
Yep.
Um, one thing like you mentioned, James, that is an obvious to me progression is that Amorim was somewhat stabilized United in terms of you don't fear an
Yeah.
annihilation somewhere. I
Yeah.
mean, I think United could go out and play Real Madrid and keep the game close
Yeah.
enough where it would be a 1 or 2 game, even though
Yep.
there's a big quality difference between the
We
teams.
wouldn't score goals, but yeah.
Now, to be fair,
Yeah.
yesterday I think we had 8 defensive-minded players on the pitch, right? But like we said, step one is stop losing games.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
if you have to draw them, that's okay because you don't go from losing games to all of a sudden just winning games.
Yeah.
If for any meaningful progression, right?
Yep.
So Amarim's job is look, let's stop losing games of football, okay, and
Yeah.
then we can build on something. and then we can get to a point where we're winning games of football. Still, the hardest thing to do in the game is to score goals, but it looks like he's brought a certain solidity to it. It's a look, James, we can't dress this up. It's defensive minded football. It was essentially a five
Yeah.
four one, right?
Yeah,
I'm
right
sure they
now
would
it
have
for
pointed
sure
this
is.
out
Yeah.
afterwards, but it's not United's job to make it easy for the opposition to score.
Correct.
They have to. Okay, once you stop losing games, you can, all of a sudden you get trust in your defense.
Yep.
Then you build a forward line. If we can get the defense right, because I mean, we'll probably send a centre back over the summer, but it's not going to drastically change from where United are at.
No.
So get the defense right now. The forward line will probably change, right?
Yeah.
And once you get different types of forwards, then you can play a different way. Midfield will need some work, of course, but everything starts, whatever you're building starts with the foundation, starts at the bottom, right?
Yep.
And there's that nerviness where every time someone took a corner against United, you were expecting them to score. A corner was as good as a penalty. We haven't seen
Yeah.
it recently.
Yep. Yep.
And when was Onana's last blunder? Was it?
It's been at least 3 weeks. I know because it's
Which
only
seems
been
like a lot. Now,
international break.
I'm not saying that I think, because his distribution and everything, to me,
It's
there's
been
4
better. It's been
huge.
better. Yes.
Yeah.
I don't remember like a disaster like we've been seeing.
He still makes me nervous, James. I'll be honest.
Yeah.
Like, there was a moment yesterday where City had a corner
Yep.
and he comes out flapping, and there's not a City player near
Yeah.
the ball. There's only a couple of United defenders heading the ball, and he still loses it to his own defense.
Yeah.
I'm like, this. He makes me really nervous. But nonetheless, this is where United were.
It's
I
probably
know
the
they,
Ipswich game, by the way, right? Probably the last one between him and Dorgu, like
yeah,
pretty
yeah,
shaky. That was
maybe,
February 26th, so it's been a bit over a month. So
yeah.
it's better, But
I
yeah,
hope we're not sitting here talking about one next week.
yeah, right.
But look, there just seems to be a certain solidity about the defense
Yep.
where it's not as porous as it once was, and you have to consider United are still missing, Licha Martinez, who's
Yep.
probably one of their most important players, who was crucial for this United team, not just in defending, but in creativity.
Correct. And
Kobe
going
Mainoo's
forward, yep.
still a big loss for United,
Ahmad.
and of course Ahmad and what have you. So these are
Yeah.
obviously key players missing. Well, if you, Amarim been taking criticism over the system that he's playing, do you share that?
No, not at all. Because it's kind of like you said, I think it's near enough impossible to join in the middle of a season. Like you say, you get a 20-year-old at left back, you get an 18-year-old at center back. That's what you get. You're not fixing things. You're not fixing everything in the middle of a year like that. It's hard enough as it is, to fix a team. And I think that the system is showing some of its strong points now as the players get it more and more. But I think it's hard to criticize a system when you look at it and say what you see on the pitch in a system is as much as the players can carry out, right? At that point in time. If they can't carry out the intentions, then you're not going to see the full intention of it. I watched enough Sporting to know this is pretty normal for him. He is really similar to what he did when he went into Sporting. The first thing he did was fix the defense. They had the best defensive record in his first full season when he, because he joined mid-season at Sporting as well. When he came in the next year, they had a great defensive record. He fixed the defense first, and helped them stay in every game so that they were there. The scoring was an evolution. Getting more goals is definitely an evolution, and I'm fine with that approach. I mean, it was horrible. I think about all the games the last 2 years, the worst batterings we've had in 10 years, honestly. When you remember them, between 7-0 to Liverpool, even in a decent season, to that the Bournemouth 4-0 at home, Palace 3-0 away. These games were so bad. I never want to see anything like that again. Liverpool at home and Tottenham at home to start the year. I'm okay with as you said, the building from the back, stop getting battered and rebuild that way. I'm fine with that. And I think it's a slow boat, but I think there is enough progress to look at it and say, when we fix and spend money in the forward line and improve it and have some players back, Will we be much better? I think so. And I think then we'll be able to tell. But given what we've seen, I think it's hard to critique much until we get a real window and a real preseason, and then we can see where we're at after that. I'm fine with it. I really don't have any issues.
I want to pick up on something that Gary Neville said yesterday, James, that resonated with me. Something that I've been sort of saying on social media for a while. We talked about the sanitized robotic nature of football and how
Yeah.
a lot of it is really boring. And when I look at the way football teams are being sent out to play, very little risk, not a lot of fluidity in the positions that they're playing, and very doesn't permit any creativity. We've heard things like Enzo Maresca say that he would have taken Enzo Fernandez off if he didn't play the exact pass he was told. Like,
Mm,
to me, maybe it's a reflection of where I'm at in life. I'm 48 years of age. Maybe I'm just changing and my perspective on life is changing. Maybe, I'm just going through a weird stage. Maybe it's a reflection of certain things that are going on inside of me. But I've never felt a period that's lasted this long where I've really found it difficult to be completely engaged with what I'm watching. And I'm not just talking about United, I'm talking about other games of football. Every once
yeah.
in a while, a game of football will surprise me where I'm like, this is really, really good. But for the most part, I'm watching a game of football and a team's won 2-0 or 1-0 or whatever, or 3-1, and I would struggle to pick out any individual. It was like, oh, I want to make sure this player's exciting. Wow, what a player. This player,
Mm,
it's just, this is to me one of the issues now that City have is that
mm-hmm.
all the individual obvious qualities gone. This is
Yeah.
something that Liverpool are going to have once Salah goes, Van
Yeah.
Dijk goes. And how do you could give me £1 billion right now and say send 11 players for United that excite you? I don't think I could find 11 players that excite me. Right, where I'm looking at going, that would get me off my seat. This player would get this. I look at the strikers that are being linked with United, wholly uninspiring. Brandon Bremo, Liam Delap.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember a single highlight of either of those players or a single moment where I'm like, holy shit, this guy's unbelievable. This kid's, when United were saying Wayne Rooney, obvious, exceptional
Mm-hmm.
talent, these exceptional talents. And now I'm looking at, there's a Brian Buemo, every, like we talked about this last week. To me, like these players, once you get outside, like the Salahs and stuff, they're all more or less the same, James.
Yeah, I
Like,
know.
I mean,
I know.
to me, all the decent, the quality players are old, with the exceptions of one or
I
two. Like Lamine Yamal, you got one or two.
Mhm.
But I'm looking at this going, this is shit. Honestly,
Yeah.
like, this is just turgid shit. This reminds
Mm,
me of table football. Seriously, where it's just foosball. Where it's like I don't really want to see a system grind out a win. Once football becomes that transactional, where it doesn't permit any type of individual creativity or class or to win, I want to fall. I love being in love with football, and I'm not in love with football right now.
yeah, I'm really quite with you on this, especially when it comes to like the attackers and strikers, because I've been having like a big think on it, and it was one of the things I planned to talk about that I wanted to speak on today, because obviously we've had all these links to players like Liam Delap and all of that, and I think that forwards are at quite easily the lowest quality, especially that they've been in that I've ever seen in general, and the players that are hyped and are the names are just not that great in general. I think they're not that great overall. And one of the things I look at is, this was kind of the point I was making on the strikers at United, right? You look at the successful players. Well, Cavani, three of them are old. Cavani, Zlatan, and Ronaldo came when they were in their 30s, and look at how they've performed compared to the other players that we've had and the other players that have been around. They still were better goal scorers than all of these guys. They were still much better than all these guys in chaotic teams at United. And you look around, the leagues and around Europe, and a lot of it's like that. I mean, Lewandowski is still Barcelona's key striker at, what, 35, 36 years old, whatever it might be. And most of the young guys and the people that were signed, the Vlahovic was signed for Juventus to replace Ronaldo. He's been bad. He's not great. Like it is mediocre. And it's not particularly exciting. And I have concerns with it because if you look at the best teams that have won anything in the Premier League and in the Champions League, they've all had these absolutely incredible strikers and forwards. And almost 9 times out of 10, they spent huge money for them, right? Mo Salah came in I would consider him like a striker in this case, obviously, to be the Liverpool's prolific kind of scorer. Erling Haaland was signed for a huge amount of money. Who's still at times capable, but even he drifts out. And I kind of blame Pep Guardiola and his over systemization for that, for nullifying players even of a quality of Haaland into practically system players at time, even though Haaland still scores a lot of goals. I don't like that. But you look at the teams that have won things, they're just not. There's not that many there.
You know what, James? I know it's Pep Guardiola is often cited as a reason for this, but I don't believe that. First of all, it takes years to change a system to produce different players. I mean, English football just finally worked out after hundreds of years how to produce technical players, despite the fact that it was obvious that it takes, because you're dealing with cultural aspects. Most people can't coach like Guardiola. To me, there's other, like, Pep Guardiola, as great as he is, there's been other amazing coaches throughout football that don't completely change how every country develops their players.
Correct.
And then beyond that, I mean, if you look at Guardiola's Barcelona team, I mean, you can't say that was a system team. You look at a City team that had unbelievable individual talent. I mean, he's always had individual, exciting, quality players, to be fair. I mean, to give him his credit. So, this idea that he makes average players great because the system, is an adjuvant to me, I'm not like.
No, more specifically, I think I just think maybe in his latter stages, he's made it a bit boring for the striker. I'm not saying his teams haven't been dynamic, because there's been times that they are, and they've had world-class talent like Kevin De Bruyne.
Yeah, I mean, he's got Haaland. I mean, to me, like, you look at Haaland's goal return. I would like to have that at United. If that's boring I kind of get what you're saying, but I look at the strikers.
I just think he could be more. Like if Haaland was at Madrid, I think he would be an insane player to watch, for example. Because
I think he would just score goals. I think he's a limited footballer and a brilliant finisher, and that's okay too. And that's okay too, because the problem is a lot of players are the opposite. They're brilliant footballers, but not brilliant goal scorers. So to me, I think, and this is one of the reasons why I think the Premier League, if Liverpool lose Salah, Arsenal are finding it hard to buy those individual quality players to elevate them to the next level.
Especially a striker.
City will probably get a huge points deduction, right? That Premier League is wide open, and this is why Forest can be third. Because it's really, really hard to buy individual talent that separates you from the opposite. I mean, you look at Bournemouth. How many of those Bournemouth players we get in United team? Maybe half of them. Kirkus, Emmanuel, all that, right? I mean, I look at United's players, Forest players. They're all more or less the same, with a few exceptions. Bruno Fernandes is the obvious exception, right? But this is what we're left with. We're left with one or two players in world-class teams, with the exception of Real Madrid, maybe, where the individual quality is not obvious. And I don't know how you fix this problem, but it's going to be something that is going to cause a problem for everyone. And I think in the Premier League, it's going to be really, really interesting. Once Liverpool lose Salah and Van Dijk, which could very possibly be this summer. City are now losing De Bruyne, which I think is the right thing to do. And you're coming to an end of an era, and the next era, is going to be really, really interesting, because it's not going to be so easy to buy the quality that's going to separate you from the opposition. Let's talk about Lyon, because we want to get we're last 15 minutes here. Knock this out really quick. Lyon United play in the Europa League. Difficult game. I was listening to Julian Lorenz on the Talk of the Devils podcast, fantastic podcast, talk about Lyon and going through their strengths and weaknesses. Obviously, last season was a disaster for them. This season, they've been much better. They're in fifth. Paulo Fonseca, third, the old AC Milan manager. He was singling out people like Ryan Shirky as being, someone that's a brilliant footballer, but now added consistency to their game. This is a team that have beaten some really good teams in this competition: Eintracht Frankfurt, Besiktas, what have you. Um, it's not the Jean-Michel Alos, I believe it is, Lyon. This is a different Lyon. It's their fifth in the French league. They're beatable, but this will be a tough game for United.
Yeah, and I actually think that in some respects, the City game, this is one of the positives I take from this. The City game actually could look pretty similar to how we would want to approach the Lyon game. They're not a team that has a lot of transition threat. They do not really attack you on the break. They do not have speedy players in there. They're even missing a couple of those from the team right now that are a little bit better at that. They're a team similar to City right now that really like to occupy and beat you with the technical quality in the final third. And so I that's one of the reasons I actually felt kind of good about it, because I was thinking ahead to the Lyon game as a more important game and thinking they're similar to City in this respect. Ryan Cherky is not, he's not like he's more like I don't know what you compare him to, but he's not like, he's not a speed demon. He's not beating you on the break. He's not doing all of that. He's a player that's gonna, in the box with their three, try to break you down and beat you that way. And United have been pretty tough to beat on in that basis recently. So they're gonna have to put in some really good defensive performances. Um, and find the net. I think it will be tough. I think it's going to be close. No matter what happens, it's going to be a very, very close tie because of that, because they have the quality to break it down. And United are probably going to have to rely on their defensive, record, because we're not scoring any goals. But that's going to be the main thing. It's not going to be like Forest. It'll look a lot more like City than it will like the Forest game, and that's okay. I think United have a good chance in that, but we're gonna have to keep the score low. We concede, then I really worry about our chances against them. We cannot concede early.
I mean, to be fair, United have been really good in Europe. The only
Yeah,
unbeaten team left is
yeah,
we like to remind everyone likes to
yep.
remind everyone, which is important. But
And 5 wins in a row too, yeah.
yeah,
It's pretty good.
that there's a tremendous prize at stake. I think this is the best version of United that could face Lyon this season,
Yes.
where there is some consistency week after week now of what you're getting in the system. I don't think they're, as we've said before, they're harder to break down. You can't rely on Old Trafford being, an important element of home advantage, because United just have been so poor at Old Trafford. But they have been really good in Europe, to be fair.
Yep.
Difficult tie, but very, very winnable. I want to mention, James, before we go, two things before we go. We mentioned Liam Delap. United obviously looking at strikers for this summer.
Mm,
From what I understand, Osman is very open to a move to Saudi Arabia. And
yeah.
I think United are prioritizing Liam Delap because they feel that Osman will go to Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, I think that's unfortunately a factor, when you consider the cost, when you consider the wages he's on, things like that. He's more likely to get that elsewhere in Saudi Arabia. Um, And of course, he'd have to consider, do I, in the present state of things, do I go join United and without Europe and low in the table and all of that, and probably take a pay cut because they're not going to pay 350,000 a week for anybody this summer, or go Saudi and get my money, and you could even come back. You never know. So that is unfortunate, but yes, I think there's still a chance. It would probably be tied to a Garnacho type of deal to Napoli that was being discussed in January, but I think it would really more likely require United to win that Europa League and be in the Champions League to be able to convince a player of something like that, and it seems rather unlikely at this point right now. Delap is definitely the most likely striker. I find it very uninspiring. I'm not sure who would be inspiring otherwise, but my biggest concern here is that I don't think it's possible this is sort of my current stance on things. I do not think it's possible to develop as a striker at United without a top striker over you. I don't think it's possible because I don't think any big club has ever developed a top striker without a good striker over them. You look at Van Persie at Arsenal, he came in under Thierry Henry, and he spent years under, there before he became a top striker. You look at all the players that Sir Alex bought. He bought like what, 8 strikers in that 20 years that in during that time, like really good ones too, between Rude and Sheringham and Cantona and York and Cole and Van Persie and all of these players. And Rooney got to learn with good ones over him, even buying Rooney as a young player. I don't think strikers can develop at top clubs as first choice. We look at how it's gone with Rasmus Højlund. He's not developing, he's not improving, he's not getting better, he's not getting these things. I think the pressure is just too much. And every successful team that I have seen has purchased a ready-made striker and developed someone underneath them, not the other way around. That's my concern. My concern is that if we bring Liam Delap in, we have another prospect.
Yeah, no, I talked about this. Yeah,
Yeah.
he's ready
And
to
then you've got
start.
him and Højlund, and you go, well, who are they learning from? Delap's never played in a high possession-based big team that's going to face the type of teams that we face. That's going to face the low blocks that we face. That's going to face teams, playing like it's, their cup final because it's Manchester United. He's never done it. He's never faced it. He's never had to deal with that. I look at the effect that guys like Cavani had on the learning of other players. I think that had a huge impact on them having those types of options available. If you get a Liam Delap, I think you figure out how to find a veteran in there too. I think you have to. I really, really worry about it, and I think that the progression will be stalled, and we'll be looking again in a year for another striker and saying, "Well, Delap's good, but he's not the solution. He's not the guy long term," and we'll be right back where we started. Because I could not find and think of a single example in the last 15 years of a player going to a big club as a prospect at striker. In other positions, yes, but at striker and making it as the main guy when they end up winning things. It doesn't happen. They always sign someone.
Yeah, I haven't thought about that, to be honest. But I do agree that you this is one of the things that I was concerned about when we're constantly targeting young players. Yeah, but you need experience on the pitch for these young
Yeah.
players to learn from and to learn the things you can coach. So we will
Especially here. I wouldn't compromise it. I mean, it's like if there was two positions, I would say striker and keeper. I don't want someone learning on the job. I want
pressure
someone
them
who knows
enormous.
what to do because at both ends, that's goals. That's the thing that matters the most at the end of the day that can affect the game
Yeah,
more than anything else.
yeah,
So,
pressure is huge.
yep,
The protest, which
yep,
of course 1958 had a protest after the game, sat in to protest ticket prices. There was actually a point during the game were supporters who are upset about them being moved, who have had a season ticket or they've had their family has been attending United games for 70 years. They turned around and gesticulated and sang right in front of the directors' faces inside Old Trafford, which is again something that I wasn't aware of until I had heard on the Talk of the Devils podcast and heard Laurie talk about it. And they had turned around and let their feelings be known in front of the directors about what does loyalty mean. These are people that aren't particularly concerned about the 5%, but they're concerned about the fact that they're being moved. They sit behind the
yeah.
dugout.
From seats
And
they've had,
this
yeah.
is something that, look,
Mm.
nothing lasts forever, James. Okay. So at some point, people get moved. I
Yeah.
understand
When we
the
get a new
upset.
stadium, it was all going to change too. To be
Understand,
fair,
yes, nothing lasts forever, but it's
Yeah.
always about the way you do things. And of course,
Mhm.
the fans have every right to protest further ticket price
Yeah.
increases that affects people in different ways. Um, so, there's certain people who are already at threshold where they can't afford it, and this is a further increase. And the 1958 rightfully making their voices heard and letting the football club know that they are upset about these ticket prices and their impact on ordinary fans. Look, the point that this is not our debt, it's yours, is a perfectly valid point.
Correct.
And,
Yes. Totally.
and
Mhm.
I support them 100% in their endeavors because I don't go to matches every week. So I don't really have a right to say, you should just pay it. You know,
Mm,
if you're going to matches every week, you have every right to voice your concerns and how
yep.
it affects you, because they've earned that right that I haven't. So, and anyway, I completely support their protest. Anything to say on that before we go, mate?
No, I mean, obviously the whole thing is complicated, but I 100% believe that the fans and people there always should have the ability to voice what they think and how they feel about a situation. And I think that the ability to have and create, hopefully, open dialogue. I mean, regardless of what it does, if it helps to just find middle grounds and things like that, then it's always beneficial to do those kinds of things. But
To me, James, I don't believe you can make an argument that says we cannot be profitable and competitive if we have affordable access to tickets for
I
fans.
agree to that. I
So
agree
to
with you
me, I think you
100%.
can
Yeah.
have affordable access to tickets for
Yeah.
fans and still be. And if you can't,
Yeah.
then there needs to be regulation change, because that is
Correct.
unacceptable
100%
to me.
agreed. Yeah.
And I think that should be true of all things in
Oh,
life, whether it's basketball, NFL.
yes.
Ordinary people should have the ability to go to games and not be priced out, because, even though you can do it, it
It's
doesn't
bad
mean you
for the
should.
game too. It really is. I mean, it's
Yeah,
bad for the game. But and it's again a point on that really is bothersome. Is I think there's an owner who was forced out by the governing body just this last week, right? He's being forced to sell from one of the lower clubs. I don't remember the name
didn't see
at
it,
the
man. Don't
moment,
know.
but somebody made a point that it's like it's ridiculous. They've put in sanctions, they've put in rules that would have prevented the thing that the Glazers got in doing. You can't do that now. And they're forcing other clubs to sell, to do things when they're being mismanaged financially. But when it comes to United, they've never done a thing about the debt, about the Glazers, about all that. Even if it was just to say, look, you got to pay this debt off because it's against the regulations to have done this, even though it wasn't at the time, or sell the club. Even just doing that, I don't think they could force them to sell, but even if they could just do that, it would make a world of difference
Dude,
to the club.
this
And it's
was
a
the
shame that they're
obvious.
not involved in it.
But look, they had the opportunity to do this when they brought in FFP.
Yes.
And this
Yeah.
to me was always the glaring omission from
Yep.
FFP. They should have
Yep.
brought in an FFP that says, we can't force you to sell, but there's a certain threshold that you cannot go beyond in terms of debt load.
Yes. Loading debt
Um,
onto the club.
yes,
Yeah. Yeah.
and in terms of dividends being taken, you
Yep.
easily could have created a situation to put them under pressure to sell because you took away the incentive to
Yep.
keep the club. That's
Yep.
what should have happened. It would have also saved Barcelona, and it
Yep.
would have saved other football clubs. But instead, they had FFP where that wasn't an issue. Like, to me, that was a scandal. But this is
That's
because,
crazy. Yeah.
well, I mean, the cabal that put FFP together was
Yeah.
essentially regulatory capture to prevent other football clubs from competing. It was never
Correct.
about
Yeah.
financial fair play. It was
Mm.
about creating barriers to making sure that,
Yeah.
the Anzi McCatchklas and this, to be fair, City and other football clubs weren't going to challenge the status quo. And that's what
Yep.
happens whenever industries have, Facebook do it, all these
Yep.
companies do it. And it's antithetical to free markets, isn't it? But
Isn't
anyway,
it?
all right, man, we'll leave it there.
Sounds good.
We'll be back again next week. Hopefully, we didn't even talk about the Newcastle game. That's a very difficult game, but hopefully, when
I think
we're
we're all thinking about Thursday, right? More than
recording
anything. Yeah.
next week, hopefully, we're United haven't lost either game. If United didn't lose, if they drew both these games, I would be happy.
Agreed.
All right, we'll leave it there. Thanks, folks. Thanks for tuning in. Take it easy, James. All the best, man.
Yes.